Obligatory cough to start us off there. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Inworld Review. It is, by my reckoning, the 6th of August. Yes, August already, of the grand old year 2017. Don't ever get that wrong, do I? Right. Now, the funny thing about August is, come August the 1st, I sort of have a permanent alarm goes off, which is along the lines of kick everybody, conference season is starting. That is to say, autumn, and well, it's not autumn yet, thank goodness, but autumn tends to be a season when conferences, exhibitions, and all sorts of things happen, not only in the organic world, but in the virtual world too. And we're near the end of the year. We have things like the Open Sim Community Convention, and over on Franco Grid there is AvatarFest, which is features lots of extraordinary avatars and things like that. And well, that's already happened this year, so it's not in the autumn. Come think of it. And we're also working on the idea of an international hypergrid expo, with so we can maybe not for filming, but we can have an in-world event that will, allow us to have presentations from German grids, Greek grids, Italian grids, French grids, etc., and have in-world translation, even though it probably wouldn't be suitable for. Well, we can record it for the benefit of the locals. So that may be coming up too. We're working on a few things there. As I mentioned on the news, Thursday Ember, where Safari is on its sort of little brief summer holiday, but Thursday's working on a wonderful hypergrid wiki idea that you can find more about by looking her up on Google+. I forget the name offhand. I mentioned it in the news earlier. So a lot of stuff happening. And right in the middle of all this, the actual event is actually in September. There is another festival known as Avatar Festival. And now I can get around to introducing the guests of the day, because that's the segue. I have two folks here. You might say they're the co-organizers of AvatarFest. My first guest is a chap named Handheld, and welcome, Han.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And basically, I know you are the sort of person that dreamt up AvatarFest originally and a sort of the inspiration behind it. But we're also joined by Eryn. I'll use her avatar name. It's a lot simpler. Eryn Calen, who I tend to think of the organizer. In fact, they're sort of co-organizers, because Han is apparently more involved again this year. But Eryn comes from, I think we can say, an organizational background, so who knows what she's doing, and especially in the PR and stuff like that. So welcome, Eryn.
Thanks for having me, Mel.
And we're also joined on the far right, as usual, by James Atloud, who will be spending most of his time operating all our cameras, but and checking for any comments for those of you watching live. Indeed, you can send your questions in and ask them via the YouTube feed if you so desire. Yes, welcome, James, too.
Thanks, Mel.
Right. So, getting into the nitty-gritty of it, no doubt our conversation, as usual, will drift into other things. But I think I'm going to start with Han, because it's always a nice way to start. It's the history of something. And I gather that this year's AvatarFest, I believe, is the third. Am I right?
Yeah, this is the third AvatarFest. And I'd like to just kind of briefly go into it, if that's all right.
Sure. I thought you could maybe start by just telling us how you had the idea and got into it, and how it's evolved, really, from your point of view.
Okay, yeah, I'd be happy to. I don't know if y'all remember or not, but in 2015, I believe it was May or June, Justin somewhat abruptly quit the open sim scene, and so there's a bit of anxiety around that, and no one heard from the OSCC. There was some concern that I was hearing that, is there going to be a conference? Is there not going to be a conference? And I felt like those two things. Him leaving and potentially not having a community-wide conference would kind of severely hurt the open sim community. So I said, hey, why don't we all, if there's not going to be this OSCC, why don't we all do our own thing? And so I came up with an embarrassingly bad name for AvatarFest. Fortunately, someone else came up with a better one, and we threw it together within about a month, I believe. And it was a success. I decided that instead of being aimed towards the enterprise and educational crowd, it should be aimed towards home users, people that rent regions, set up camp out here instead of working. And I think that's, OSCC came back and they had their conference. It worked out really well for them and for us. Yeah. And then last year I had health problems. I had a heart attack, and that didn't go as well. This year is going a lot better. All 3 years, Eryn has been there, and as you said, she knows what she's doing. I'm just kind of like, I have an idea. I'll say, okay, I think we should do this, and she'll go, okay, this is how we'll do that. And it's been really great working with her, and together, I think that AvatarFest has really been successful. And now I've babbled, I'm going to hand it back over to y'all.
Well, final question, then I'll move to Eryn. I mean, it's really probably best to describe AvatarFest as an expo, an exhibition, rather than a conference, isn't it? So it never really replaced OSCC, which of course is still going fine. I'm on the steering group for that, but
I would like to say that
but it's well, what I was going to say, and actually, this is based on speaking to Eryn. Although it's an expo, an exhibition, it is not like a trade exhibition as such. It is really geared to the idea of people out there who are doing interesting things on the hypergrid to come along and show what they can do in a consolidated space. It's not like a place for all the grids on the hypergrid to put up placards saying "Come visit us."
No, it's like I said on the thing. Oh, go ahead, Eryn.
Yeah, carry on there. Yeah.
Eryn, no worries. Yeah. Well, like we keep saying is it was never meant to replace OSCC. OSCC is more of a conferencing, more of a where are we going with this thing, whereas we said, well, we feel the need to give people an outlet to sort of express themselves and show us the projects that they're actually working on and get a bit of promo for that, which they might not otherwise get, and also just have a bit of plain old fun. So that's how we ended up with having performers and basically throwing a huge big party for the opening weekend, and that sort of stayed around. Right. So that we're having just a great huge get together, having fun, and at the same time showing what people, or showcasing what people are actually capable of when they're doing their projects and using this great software we all love.
Yeah, it's a matter of nurturing that. I think, encouraging people to, like show and tell, you do your thing, bring it, get feedback, get, positive reinforcement from everyone else doing the same thing. I think, and the opening weekend, it's kind of sort of like a giant block party, if that makes sense.
You mentioned the opening weekend. I mean, this obviously this is 23rd, 24th of September. Does it continue after that weekend? Actually, I can't read there's a name tab blocking my view of the poster. It tells us October 30th.
No, that's fine. Well, you can think of having the opening weekend as one great big party. Yeah. With a couple of performers as well, and people come visiting, but the actual expo will stay on until end of October. I've just spoken with Zach because they graciously are hosting the whole thing, and we're very conscious of copyright issues and data security issues, and that's why we have people that we trust, and they set it up for us as a standalone hypergrid thing, so that we actually don't have the assets floating around somewhere, but they're just on that one database that nobody else can access. So
yeah, I'd like to jump in on that because there's been a question recently about, well, does AvatarFest, you know, what are they going to do about CopyBot? What's their IP policy? From the get-go, from 2015, it has been very important to me personally that we're set up somewhere where we can wipe the database after it's all done, because I know people, what would be the word for it? Basically, I have to be able to say to people, we absolutely respect your property, your rights, and we're not going to, you know, run off with it. No one else is going to run off with it. After the festival's done, it's gone. And that's one of the reasons I work with Metros. They've been able to say, okay, yeah, we'll set up a separate database, set up the separate server, and they've been able to fit that requirement because we absolutely respect intellectual property rights.
It reminds me, actually, you'll laugh, Eryn, it reminds me of something you said to me yesterday about, you know, people taking booze and things, where somebody had approached you and said, hey, yeah, we're up for this. And, you know, they thought their bill from last year was going to still be there and they were going to use it. And you said, no, it's been wiped. And, you know, so basically, so basically the dedicated grid is there. It's not on any other grid. So there's no sort of conflicting loyalties there. And
no, it's absolutely separate. Yeah. And we did that from the get-go, and we actually turned down help that wasn't able to provide us with that separate database.
Sure. Now, when you presumably when people take booze in this, basically they bring stuff in for their booze via the hypergrid, or maybe even build on your grid, and everything they do that then goes into your local grids database, which is cleaned after the event.
Or yes, that's exactly how it works. Yes.
Yeah. So if somebody does the building for the fest and brings it in, then they've obviously still got it in their own inventory, but the copy in your database will vanish as soon as the event's over.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't hold on to anything. I mean, we have like, I think a terrain that we have a train that like Eryn made, and you know, I think the streets, and that's about it. Everything else is just gone. And again, that's because, you know, the people who show their stuff, that's a trust, and we want to live up to that and honor that. So, you know, we're not going to hold on to it for any longer than we have to, basically, to show it off.
Well, say something interesting while we're on the issue of protection and everything else. Again, we were talking yesterday, Eryn, and one of our friends is often on the show, Leslie King from TangleGrid. TangleGrid are known, for example, for these quarterly expos they do on themes, you know, like a steampunk or home and garden and stuff. And they always said it was the same kind of thing, you know, people exhibit. It's not a commercial thing. It's a sort of show-off thing. They can give out landmarks and stuff like that. But you know, they can't sell anything. I gather that this year that may be changing. They may be doing an expo where they'll allow a limited amount of selling. But your view on this is pretty much the same, isn't it? You know, you don't have vendors and actual people selling stuff. I mean, if an artist or even a craftsperson wants to exhibit their work, which is what it's all about, they do exhibit it, and they can probably give out a location where you can visit them. But that's it, isn't it? You're not there to become a marketplace for the entire hypergrid.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of jump in.
Yeah, go ahead.
And again, I apologize. I don't mean to talk over you, but
that's fine.
This is pretty much why I'm involved. To me, it's important that we showcase personal projects or role play projects, support projects. No one has come in with, like, say, a depression support group thing, but if they did, I would be enthused about helping that out. What we don't want to do is we don't want to be used for advertising third-party projects. Like last year, someone came in and they're like, oh, well, come to my blah, 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 which has been featured in AvatarFest. And we said, no, that's just that's not copacetic. We want to show off basically what user projects do, why people rent their regions, the things they do on them. We don't really want to, if you're making money, we support you in theory, but we don't. That's not the purpose of AvatarFest. The purpose of AvatarFest is to support the non-commercial hobbyist side of OpenSim. Eryn, let's jump in.
Also, if I might elaborate that, is for us, we feel there's a lot out there that people who are after the for sale, the for profit stuff, they have platforms, they have stuff, and there's a lot of groups, a lot of venues that cater for them. We also felt when we first started off AvatarFest, and correct me, Han, if I'm wrong, is we felt that there's no platform so far for people who just do it for the love of doing things.
Agreed, 100%.
So that's where we came from. And also, basically, we don't want to get entangled in all those for-profit stuff because it's not worth the problems it can cause, basically.
Sure.
I want to amplify what you just said, because that is absolutely right. It's not just a matter of commercial and profit versus non-profit. It's a question in my mind of professional versus amateur. I want to encourage home users, quote unquote amateur people, to come out, build, get into things. I felt like OSEC in particular, which is a great festival, I support it, is geared towards the professional set, and there's no real room for amateur home users. And that's a large part of what I want AvatarFest to be, is a space to show off amateur, non-professional people.
It's funny, this show itself falls between the two sides almost, because, we like to cover the social and the, what people are doing aspect of it too. But of course, my history inclines me a lot more to that professional, what can be done with it as well. But it's interesting, people who aren't in OpenSim, but are in, say, somewhere like Second Life, have this impression that is all open, free, and nothing's happening. Well, which actually couldn't be further from the case. Look at what you're doing. Look at Safari every week. But they also, I was speaking to somebody who's quite big into the virtual commerce in Second Life, who does this TV show there, and I think it was only a few weeks ago, said, we're not over there because we're very busy here, and there's no commerce over there, is there? And I said, don't you? I think you'll find there is, because clearly it's an open source system, so there are grids based on it that are running commercial operations, and most of them are hypergrid enabled, because obviously they'll get more customers and things. But I think the heart of OpenSim, and I know somebody like Cesar Ember would agree with me, is just like what people are doing with it. Obviously, whenever we're talking, say me with Cesar or something, I was thinking, well, if things need fixing, it's the users who should be telling the devs what we want fixing, not the devs saying, oh, we've had a bright idea about fixing this and breaking something else in the process, and, the changes coming down from high. But of course, it is all a volunteer thing, at the back end. So, there's no boss around telling people kind of what to do. So the commercial side and the community side, for want of a better word, really, just sort of exist hand in hand. And, there are people on the Great Canadian Grid where we broadcast from, for example, who really just treat it as an alternative Second Life. They'll come in, they don't even know what the hypergrid is. And if they do, they won't use it, because they'll build a community and become a kind of an insular tribe, which is something that happens despite its size in Second Life an awful lot. And I think something we have in OpenSim, of course, because of the hypergrid, you have a much there's less commonality. There's a much more greater variety. You go to, say, an Islamic cultural sim or grid. If you go to a region like that in Second Life, it's on American servers and probably being owned and run by some well-meaning Americans. Whereas on the hypergrid, you are probably teleporting to servers that are actually in the Middle East, in the region that is being reflected in that build. And it's conceptually, that's a very different thing. You're moving between it's the electronic flat Earth, yes, but we're still jumping between servers all over the world and experiencing different cultures and different aspects of things. And of course, many places in the world aren't commercially orientated in the same way many countries in the West are. In Britain, we're a commercial economy, so is America, so is most of Europe. But and everybody has to live in the modern world wherever they are. But there are cultures out there that really just pursue life, including virtual life, with other values other than commerce and buy and sell. So we experience that, and I think I've been talking to Thursday about somehow putting some kind of conference come exhibition together where we'll get. I don't know how many German grids there are, and then French grids, Greek grids. They all speak different languages. And we often, people like OSCC often miss out on those because, the audience will be mostly English speaking, and anybody from, might be a bit of Spanish thrown in, but they'll be speaking in English. It's all governed by the English language. And I think there's a great space for, presentations in German, French, and using things like Inworld translators. And,
well, the thing of it is with OpenSim that is really great, and I'm sorry for just kind of like really pushing in here, but for me, it's not even a question of commercial, non-commercial. It's not a question of open or closed. It's a question of accessibleness. It's a question of giving people their own voice and form of expression. The Islamic people in other countries, instead of having to go to these English-speaking English or American people, they can just say, okay, we're setting up a server, we're putting out our own thing, our own perspective.
Yeah.
And OpenSim is very empowering. And that is, to me personally, something I feel passionate about, that OpenSim gives people a voice in a way that I think other platforms, which I won't go into, really don't. Because you can set it up. You can either set it up on your desktop, or you can go to like Great Canadian Grid and rent a server there, or a compromise like going to Metro and renting a server there. It's accessible on whatever level you want, and you can easily go into it and share your perspective, share your taste, share your view on any number of subjects. And that's very heady and empowering. And I think that's one of the greatest draws of this platform.
And it's just to reiterate, it's really the hypergrid, which is integral to most OpenSim. You don't have to have it, but it's the hypergrid that connects all these independent grids together that really does empower that sort of instant travel between grids, no swapping viewers or anything like that. It's one.
Making 20 logins for like 20 different grids. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And that is so much the ease of it. Recently I've moved to mostly being in my desktop grid. And, I just do all my hypergridding from there. I knew in principle it was the ideal, but to me, I was, I was telling you, Eryn, yesterday, wasn't I? I didn't realize till I actually started doing it, how natural it feels, rather than logging into, say, the HQ at the Great Canada Grid here, and then hypergridding on from there. And then if Canada goes down for, an hour's maintenance, it logs me out of the hypergrid as well and things like that. Whereas when you're actually going places from your desktop, including here, of course, it's it's just much more intuitive. It's like opening up your home, walking around your home, going out of your home, and going to any destination you fancy traveling to that day.
Yeah, you wake up, you get dressed, you go out to the club in real life, you log in, you get dressed, you go out to whatever grid in their club on the hypergrid. I absolutely agree.
Yeah, that sounds. Yeah, so this. Getting back to AvatarFest itself for a minute, it's very much a celebration of what people are doing, and I mean the average user is doing. You might be an artist, so you want to really, feel like showing that you're a wonderful artist, but you might just be doing something interesting of your own, and you want to bring along a little taster of that or something to the festival. Now, I'm sure I'll have both of you back, or at least one of you back, in the week before the festival itself. So we'll be talking about what's actually going to be happening there.
Absolutely.
But today is August the 6th, and there is a deadline of August the 9th, which is only about 3 days from now.
Well, it's actually the
15th.
August 15th.
Oh, okay, right. Anyway, there is a looming deadline, shall we put it that way,
Fair enough.
for submitting for a booth. Basically, it's not a proposal like OSCC. You don't have to write an epic essay just to explain what you're doing. You basically, well, I'll let Eryn tell you, but basically, there are booths. You can apply for them, and I'll let her tell you what you need to do and any restrictions on that, obviously, and where to go to do it and what they're looking for, I think. So over to you, Eryn, again.
Right, thanks.
There's a handful for you.
Yeah. Well, the application process is really easy because we have a website, which is avatarfest.net. And on there's a little form that you fill out. And that's basically to enable us to get back to you and to get a little bit of an idea of what it is you want to show. Because we're going to put that on the website as well. And have it in the program and stuff like that. So it's just basically for organizational things that we have the application process. What we have is 2 plot sizes. So when you refer to booths, it's basically just an empty plot, which is either 20 meters by 20 meters or 32 by 32 meters. We still have both available. And actually going back to what you said earlier, Mel, is we already have people from Canada, America, Germany, France, anybody else? Not sure, but yeah, so that we got a lot of people already, but still got a lot of more plots. So if you're hearing this, if you're seeing this and you want to take a part and you have a great project or just a project that you think would be of interest to other people, just come to Han or myself, talk to us. If you feel that, yes, that's something that other people might want to see, just fill out an application, write an email to us. We have an official email as well, which is AvatarOfficial, missing an I, although, it's official.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, that was a little mishap, but at gmail.com. So you can also just write to us if you're not sure whether that would be of interest to other people or not. Whereas I say, if it's showable, if it's doable, if it's something that you are actually inviting people to see on your own grid, your home grid, your standalone, wherever, then yes, it's probably something that you can show off in AvatarFest. And the other part of that is for the opening weekend. We're still looking for performers. We have 1 of 6 already done, which is Oshi, who's going to do, she's a poetess, and so she's going to do a little reading. If there's musicians interested in still doing it, like last year we had the Whalers and other people performing, we had DJs coming in, and it was actually a bit too much, so we've cut back this year and we only have 6 spots for that. I mean, if there's like 2 more, then we'll probably fit them in, but we're not going to do
a music fest.
Yes, we're not going to do performers all day long, which is sort of what happened last year, and that was a bit too much. So
yeah, everyone was tripping over everyone, so
yes,
we're trying to simplify things this
exactly
year.
And we're going to look a little bit towards more that people actually have more time to look at the projects that are presented.
Yeah, the trouble with events per se, performers especially, is that people congregate and they don't walk, while the performance is on. It's the same in real life. They're not walking around the sidelines seeing things,
Absolutely.
And if you just have endless stuff going on, no, I don't want to teleport now, thank you.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we have the whole thing. That's why we keep the region open the whole month. Is you come in the first weekend and you may be burned out or whatever. You're spending like 8 hours listening to performers, and you don't want to wander around. Well, a couple of weeks later, maybe you want to come in, and it's to give people a chance to see everything that's there, and for everyone who exhibits to have their exhibits seen. So
I must admit, even from the days, my days in Second Life, some years ago now, really, I did like to go into performances, but I did, I like to think, that there will be a thing going on for a week or something, but there'd be a week or two where the regions were left open. And I actually quite like, I'm not antisocial, but I quite like the solitary experience sometimes. So if there's something I like, there's nothing better than go back and see it when it's nice and quiet and do that unencumbered by bumping into
I was part of the Second Life birthday for like 3 years in a row.
Yeah,
my favorite part of it was the end where the public doesn't come in. You don't have the traffic. You can just buzz around and see everything. So I thought of that when I decided the policy of like keeping the region open for a full month so that everyone else could experience that.
It is a big show. I mean, in Second Life 2, the Relay for Live people have the Fantasy Fair, which has got to be one of the best events they have over there. But I've never really been able to go to it, except when I was around, I got a preview and was able to get in beforehand to have a look around. It would just be so jam-packed. You can move, and it wasn't up long enough afterwards to really have time to go and look at it when it had gone quiet. In fact, it never did go quiet. And I actually think it's a bit of a shame, really. Part of it is scaling and how many people we can get on the region and stuff. But I have a Twitter feed I still do, full of Second Life arts and destinations and arts and destinations and machinimas. And I flatly refuse to tweet links to events in Second Life. This is because I know that all those events are going to be lag hell because they've been promoted all over the place. And, most of the events that are worth going to, people won't be missing. And I just find them sort of to be unmanageable. That actually, to me, at the moment, is another great thing about OpenSim, because things can get crowded. There've been safaris with 50 avatars on them, but generally speaking, you don't get that sardine can kind of event, and lag hell event. You get crowded ones and not so crowded ones, but everything is still fairly manageable here. It's not people aren't herded into vast events in quite the same way.
You're not stuck with like trying to log into a place and not being able to because it's too crowded. You're not stuck with having to load a billion other avatars stuff. Yeah, I absolutely agree.
And actually, just one little anecdote while we're at it. As you probably know, Linden Lab launched their new something, Sansar, on Monday. And one of the, actually there are some really sort of photographically lovely things to look at, although you have to wait about half an hour for every region to load, and you can't sit on anything because it doesn't work yet. But one of the really disconcerting things that I think some Second Life users who jumped in there found was events and meeting other avatars. If you all log in to the same region, or the experience, I believe it's called, and it gets crowded, then they do something Signwave Space do it too. It's called sharding, which means they bring up duplicate space to handle crowds. But the thing is, it's a duplicate space. And what happens is if you crash or are forced out of the region where you're having a party with some friends, when you re-log in, they send you to a shard. And it looks absolutely the same, except none of your friends are there. The shard is there, accepting newcomers.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they're going to do performers with that.
Yeah, you'll lose. I know Space have a system. We're getting technical here, for example, where they can. What they can do is they can have an instance of the stage, and they can shard the stage as a full stage with the avatars on it. And then they can shard different instances to cope with vast crowds. And they reckon they can go up to about 50,000 avatars. So they do say they can't, they can't really do stadium size events, but they could compete with, concert hall type events. And, they do it by basically, every 100 or so avatars is actually in a different copy of the theme, but the stage itself and the performance is common to all of the copies. But even so, it's that thing of, well, damn it, we can only fit 20 people in this Sansar space, and here I am chatting away with some friends, and whoops, log out, log back in, and where are the friends?
Make for a heck of a date night if you go with your, and then you're separated, and that's just a mess.
It's like a disaster movie, isn't it? When a couple are at different ends of the ship when it goes down, and they all go running around. Where's my partner? They're on the other bit. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, that was a little aside. It was topical. Yeah.
No worries.
So obviously, this the actual festival that you're putting on is going to be running for a goodly long time. I mean, what is it, 5 weeks in all, maybe even 6? So
yeah, I believe that's
right. Even if it's in the most demand thing on the hypergrid for that time, you're hopefully not going to have any instances where too many people. Or
we're not going to send everyone to like some random sandbox or something. That's for sure.
Yeah, quite. Even the party.
If I might cut in, because Zach, who's doing the servers, actually had a good idea, and we might be able to do that. Is if it gets too crowded, we might just fire up a second region with just the stage on it, nothing else. And if we get into trouble, which I don't think we will, but if we do, we can always sort of do the backup and go to the other region, which is basically empty except for the stage, and then fill the bandwidth up with avatars.
Are you the actual grid that you hold this on? Is it a single region or 4 regions or?
Yes, no, it's a standalone, but
right.
So it's one simulator. It's a standalone hypergridded simulator. So since the simulator can have more than one region, that's fine. But it's going to be on a very separate server, and so it's not connected to any grid directly. Which is another thing, because we feel that it's very important that we're grid independent.
Yeah, no. Actually, what I actually meant was you're an independent grid, but how many regions will be in that grid for your event? Or like
basically just the one. But because we're doing testing beforehand, and if we feel that it depends on what people bring in as exhibitions as well.
Sure.
How much pressure there is on the servers. We might bring in a second one if we feel that we might run into trouble with the events. But that's only sort of a backup plan.
That's what I mean, OSCC does it, and a whole lot of other conferences and big events do it, is they they spread the event on 4 regions. Right, one simulator, independent simulator, but it has 4 regions. And if you imagine on a map, you've twisted the regions around into a diamond instead of a square. The top of the diamond, the lower part of the top diamond, as it were, is a stage. And then the other 3 remaining regions are the audience. So effectively, all your mechanics and your stage crew and performers are on the stage sim. But the audience is spread across 3 other regions. Most of the regions are not used because it's the junction between them. But of course, that allows you to get 3 grids of audience capacity and also have a relatively lag-free stage. You know, for big events, that, you know, that I personally, I would have thought, this is just my thought, is if you got the impression there were going to be a lot more people and you were worried about the grid handling it, you would actually put 4 regions on the grid and put the stage on one of them and guide the audience to the other 3. But
yeah, I might get back to that in a couple of years. But
yeah,
AvatarFest, I don't think is that huge yet. So I don't think it's necessary to have more than the 1 region, really. We've dedicated, say, sort of little less than a quarter to the stage and space around it for audience, and that's usually plenty because people tend to crowd together when there's an event going on anyway. So and that leaves plenty of room for the exhibitions, which is what AvatarFest is really all about.
Also, I personally, we want people to see the exhibits. You know, and we want to encourage them to, okay, listen to the music, but go out and, you know, look at things, or at least like while you're dancing, you cam out and see what else there is. So if there's a lag problem, we're happy to set up another region for people to have performances at, but our first preference is to have all the performers at the AvatarFest region so that they see the exhibits and at least get a glimpse of, you know, oh, that looks interesting. When this is done, I'll go over and look at that kind of idea.
Yeah. So the trick usually is to park yourself somewhere near the stage and listen to music, but then go to cam view and cam around the rest of the region.
Exactly, yes.
Exactly, and a lot of people do that as well. Yeah. So, you know, and that's the whole idea behind it, is that you can actually see what's going on.
I think more people should do that, actually, because apparently, you know, if, well, standing's okay, but especially if avatars sit for something, it really reduces the strain on the servers. And as opposed to walking around or doing all the things one does, or even dancing. And when you're in cam mode, it uses, it's all local to you. Your viewer just cams as best it can at the frame rate it can do. It has camming has very little impact on the server, whereas avatars walking around does. So it's quite a useful thing for people to learn to do if they don't already do that.
Yeah, well, like I said, the thing is that I really, you know, if it's a matter of doing it or not doing it, we're happy to open up a special performance region, but it's still the ideal thing is to have everything together so that people have an idea of what's going on. And whereas if you are in a special stage region, you don't see the other exhibits, you don't get the pull of curiosity and all that. So.
Okay, well, I'm thinking now of people watching this, you know, who they've heard all this and they think they're interested, but they're still not quite sure whether it's the sort of thing where they would want to take a pitch, a booth, a patch of land at, whatever the phrase is.
Take part in,
I was actually asking you the sort of things you would be looking for. Now, I mean, I know you've explained, you know, we don't want shops, it's not a marketplace, and you won't be able to sell anything. Presumably, you better put up a link, you know, give out a landmark and things. will you have any? Firstly, will you have any rules about? Let's say somebody puts down. I will probably be there, by the way, with sharing Thursday's setup. You know, we'll just be half and half on the one she's booked, which suits us both really, because I've probably got to book for the whole thing. But let's say I have a little pitch advertising this show. Now, technically not advertising it, promoting it. No, not promoting it. Making people aware of it, or whatever. You know,
the thing is that stuff like that you can promote, because we like I said before, we have, for example, Visions.
Yeah. And,
which is, you know, the magazine, and we're happy enough to support that, because we think it's whatever adds to the hypergrid community. Exactly. is basically what we feel is worth showing.
Exactly. Also, with Visions, they're not promoting a service. They're not saying, hey, subscribe to our magazine, you know, pay us money or whatever, or even, you know, so we're happy to boost them because they feed the community. They're not charging. It's a wholly non-commercial thing.
So I have a lot of, you know, my actual question was actually, I've got a lot of toys. Like in front of the stage here, you see 2 cameras, but round about side of the stage, obviously not pointing at us because there's a wall there, is another camera. It looks identical, but actually, if you click on that camera, it automatically makes an NPC of you for yourself, right? And it's a nice little gadget. Now, if I had a little booth, you know, telling people about the Inworld review and maybe sharing some links to replays or whatever, one thing, maybe I will want to have a little box that gives away a copy of that camera for people who might want it. And my actual question I was leading into, using myself as an example, which is misleading, is that are there any specifications about vendors doing something like that? Because if I gave away that camera, I'm not selling it, so it's like a giveaway to the community. Anybody wants one, a little present from Metaworld or whatever. But also, your security thing about being very fussed about, you know, presumably nothing will be copyable at the event because you're very aware of security, in just the same way as you wipe out the inventory after it's all over. So are there any restrictions on things that somebody wants to do, like give things to visitors, or even allow a visitor to copy something and put it in their suitcase?
Eryn probably could answer this better, but basically the only restrictions are we don't want anything that goes outside of the parcel. Last year, I logged in and had like 20 NPCs. 20 NPCs on my head, and I'm like, no, this just isn't going to fly. We don't want people setting up donation boxes, because that's the same thing. I don't see a problem, and Eryn can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't see a problem with giving away freebies, as long as they're, you know, you can source them and say, no, this isn't copyrighted. It's Creative Commons. It's something I made, you know. I don't see a problem with that. People did give away, Jamie gave away a build last year, if I remember correctly. So, you know, Eryn, you want something here?
That's exactly right. Jamie made a whole diner, and then she made the whole diner copyable, which is fine because she made it.
Yeah, quite.
Yeah, you know, so that's really the whole one. The one point is, you want to give something away, you're fine as long as you hold the intellectual property rights.
Or it's
you
something
can't
that's
give
open
anything
source.
away. Yeah, or you have something, you know, you found something when you know it's not, or you know the source of it. So basically, but that goes the same thing really as when you made it yourself, is you have the intellectual property rights to give it away. If you get something that is full perm, you know you can give it further away, which is basically the same thing.
I happen to be sort of fascinated by gadgetry, and you know, just like people like to show off their regions and their landscaping skills or their building skills and stuff. I absolutely love gadgets, you know, that enhance the experience by being a HUD or something like that that does things like
Second Life are all interactive.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
it's
like
interactivity.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, often when I'm out searching for freebie things or things I can use, I'm attracted to, you know, little things like if it's James has got a copy now too. I picked up from somewhere. It's a HUD, but it's just a square prim that's in the corner, but it toggles my avatar's walking speed. You know, so that I can walk at speed 3, which is faster than running and looks like walking. And I'm always set on speed 3 so that I can walk around quickly. And there's no way of easily doing that in the viewer. But with this little HUD, I can just get a menu and alter my speed, like you alter the speed of a vehicle. And, you know, toys like that, I think, are great. So, you know, and if somebody has coded them in their open source and they're giving away for free, you know, it's lovely to go to somewhere where there's a booth full of gadgets.
Yeah, that's sharing. I think that, I mean, personally, I don't see a problem with that as long as, you know, you can say, you know, if someone comes up to you and goes, okay, where'd this come from? You can either say, well, I made it, or you can say, oh, well, I got it from Outworlds, or I got it from Zadaru, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I always prefer people actually do original things or things they've made maybe using open source parts.
I was playing with the idea when the copybot question came up. I thought of saying, okay, Second Life Birthday requires that all your builds are new, specifically for SLB. I played with the idea of having a similar policy, but I kind of decided for us, you know, maybe that's a little too strict, but it's an idea I admire and I would actually rather prefer, but, you know, I'm not going to insist on, but I do. You know, if you're going to give something away, be able to tell us where it came from, I would say.
I've had an idea. If I took an extra booth and actually made an installation in a globe, I could bring that back year after year, and I would simply turn it upside down and sideways and everything, and the globe would still look the same, but it would be different. Sorry, I'm being...
The thing is that people do reuse what they made for AvatarFest.
Exactly.
Which is, you know, it's kind of the point to show what you're doing, and you can either take a part of what you're doing anyway and put a part of it on AvatarFest. And that means it's basically a copy of what you have somewhere else already. Or you build something specifically for AvatarFest, like Eldo's doing, for example, this year, and I'm pretty sure that he's using it somewhere else on one of his builds or one of his regions.
Yeah.
Further down the line, it might not be immediately, but it doesn't go to waste. He
probably made it on.
Yeah, I believe Lighten does the same thing. With his AvatarFest builds, I believe he reuses them.
Yeah, it's just. These things are usually just exclusivity things, you know. It's new at the point when people come to the fest to see it. You know, it's hardly any harm archiving it somewhere afterwards. But it might be something that you want to build anyway, so you build it for AvatarFest, and then you know you take it. You have a copy of it anyway because it's yours, and so you take it back to your original project afterwards. And, you know, people who then afterwards might be visiting your project because they've seen a part of it in AvatarFest, recognize that bit that they've already seen, you know. So that's also a nice way of harking back to your original projects. Now I'm thinking of, like, as you mentioned earlier, OSCC tends to be a rather sort of serious, sort of professionally geared event. But one thing Thursday and I did last year is we had a sort of half day on the second day, which was, you know, a hypergrid safari, basically for people at that event who'd never experienced the thing. You know, we wanted to take them out and show them the best of the hypergrid. Are you entertaining anything like that, in the sense that somebody might want to come and exhibit, purely non-commercial, non-profit, at the event, and kind of arrange as part of their exhibit a tour or an experience or something that is maybe like Safari recently went. I think the sim's called Res Mailer. And it probably is. It's not a good example because it's probably not your cup of tea. But they had a system where they took us up onto the skybox and demonstrated using a HUD on the screen to literally res all the items on the sim below. A kind of automated thing that people who don't know how to build could use to build. A great toy, and it showed great potential. But of course, to set that up as an exhibit, they had to put it somewhere and then take people to it, because it was a sim-wide exhibit. It was an empty sim with a control room up top, and the control room is what they were showing off, and it was manipulating the sim on the ground beneath them. Now that's a bit far-fetched, but for example, if they wanted to show off what they were doing, they are somebody who could not possibly come and confine the example to a small patch. Would you be open to? I got a phone somewhere. Yes.
Oh, that's me. But and
okay.
I'm letting my roommate catch that.
Right. Yeah,
I see two questions there, and if I could take a moment to answer them.
Yeah, basically, I was just going to ask if you were open to people that might have proposals.
Yeah, like I said, first off, if and I'm sorry for just kind of jumping in.
No, it's sure.
The first part of that, we've had two. I've had. I just lost everything. I just lost my voice thing. But the first year and the second year, we had hypergrid Safari come in, and that worked out really well. They came in after the event. I believe on the first year they came in the second week of AvatarFest. Yeah. I don't remember when they came in last year. If someone is doing a cross hypergrid event and wants to visit us or somehow incorporate us, I would be very welcoming of that. I'm not really sure how I would feel about someone kind of using AvatarFest as a launching off point, where it's like, okay, you come to our parcel here, but most of your attention is over there. Yeah. I think Eryn and I would probably have to talk about and deal with that on a case-by-case basis. Sure. So I really can't give an answer on that. I'd have to actually be in the situation at the time to, I don't know. What do you think, Eryn?
Well, if it's something like that project that you were talking about, and they were sort of exhibiting that on AvatarFest, I probably wouldn't have a problem with that. If they bring people in to watch their little bit, and usually people say, oh, what's that right next door? What's that? Whatever. Yeah. Across. So that's actually bringing people into AvatarFest. I wouldn't have a problem with that. There's one thing that sort of is a bit like that, and that's the theater, the art,
right?
The ART, and they are so far they have been performing on there, but last year that has been a bit of a problem for various reasons, and so what they're thinking now is probably just having a launch point and bringing people back to wherever it is they are performing, where they are actually in control of the servers, which is not ideal for us. But since they've been committed to AvatarFest and doing some stuff, again, I don't have a big problem with that. But in a general case, I would say I agree with Hans saying that we would look at it on a case-by-case basis. And because for us, AvatarFest is about enhancing the community. So if it's something that does that, we'll probably we don't mind promoting that as well, even if it's apart from our AvatarFest. If it does not, then we probably would say thank you, but no thank you.
Yeah, it's a bit.
Yeah, on a related note, and I'm sorry again, I'll make this quick. On a related note, I'm talking to people in various G+ groups about how to revive an OpenSim creations kind of project, and I'm seeing if there's any interest. And I would personally, if it works out, like to have some sort of meeting in AvatarFest, on the AvatarFest region for that in the middle of the month. So if some other project, like say, and this is what I know, I'm going back to it, if a support group of some sort like said, well, we're setting up a non-commercial group and we want to have a get together in the middle of the month, I would be supportive of that kind of thing too.
Yeah. I mean, my reference was purely hypothetical for the, for somebody who's listening or watching at the moment to, because the example I gave was a bit complex. So, it's actually a bit like putting up the frontage of a theatre on your patch. And when people go to the door to the theatre, they get into a hypergrid trap and end up in a real theatre bill somewhere. And you question, it's actually part and parcel of the hypergrid. I actually love it where I put, let's say on the grid, I'm building a huge forest, but I've got limited space, so it's not that huge. It's nice it's actually nice to go on the hypergrid and find a really big forest somewhere and put a secret gate in my forest that extends.
True. And we actually had that. We actually had that, and we don't have a problem with that as long as it's advertised as such, as long as people know what they're getting into. And that's basically the key here, is that you don't set up a trap. You say, okay, by entering here, you can go over there, or you can go over there, which is part and parcel of the hypergrid, which is fine. But it's informing people beforehand that we think is important.
Oh God, yes, for sure.
Yeah, well, the other thing of it is that it's for the first 2 years we would open up with Fedoria. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right. He would do a show on his own region, which wasn't part of AvatarFest, but it would be to promote AvatarFest. So it's like it was a part of our festival, whereas someone else came in with an exhibit last year, and it was kind of like, no, don't pay attention to AvatarFest. Go over here and look at my thing. And it's like, you're wanting people to leave us to go pay money to you. No, we're not doing that. So it's really a question of intent, and whether you don't have to why you're wanting people. With the theater group, they actually tried to work with us and tried to stay at AvatarFest, but for technical reasons, it just wouldn't work. So we're like, all right, we don't mind, so again, it's a case by case basis sort of thing.
No, I mean, it will give people watching an idea that you are open, to, so long as it's non-profit and so long as it's not a hijack operation, you are open.
Yeah, exactly.
You're open.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're willing to cooperate, and it's just a matter of talking with us. We are approachable. So when in doubt, just talk to us, and we'll figure something out, or maybe we'll find out, well, maybe it's not the right kind of venue for what you're thinking of doing. That's a possibility too.
Han, you mentioned in passing there, intriguingly, OpenSim Creations, or the idea of reviving it. I mean, it strikes me, I'd like to hear about that for one thing, but it also strikes me that this could be a very, in the sense that it's a coming together place very much as well. There might be people out there who have an idea, but don't have anything to exhibit per se, but they've had an idea to start something, and they want to see if there's other people coming to the festival who are interested in getting together with them. And that sounds like, what you have to do with a resurrected OpenSim, I've forgotten the name now. Terrible memory.
OpenSim Creations. Yeah, basically we're at the networking stage at this point. and I'm pretty much going around and trying to gauge interest and figure out like, okay, the people I've heard from, myself included, have real life health issues, so none of us are really going to, take up the sword and shield, and but maybe we can figure out a way to do things together. So at this point, I'm asking people, hey, I think this would be a great thing to do. Are you interested? And from there, once I have the interest, then we'll figure out what the next step is. So that's where we're at with that.
I actually had a feeling that Open Sync Creations was backed up somewhere legitimately, but even when the actual website closed, but I haven't a clue where.
No, that's actually the reason that they closed, is because he had a crash, and he's like, look, with my real life work and everything else, I don't have the time and energy to do this. So,
right.
Okay,
so it's backed up in limbo somewhere on a.
Yeah, I think there's like some links on archive.org maybe, but that's about the end of it as far as I know.
Right.
And the G+.
So I'm just thinking something that might be useful to have there is a kind of ideas meeting area where somebody hasn't got anything to show but just has an idea they want to talk about, yours included. Maybe they would be sitting behind a seat somewhere and inviting passing people, with maybe a sign saying what their idea was and inviting people to chat about it. That seems to be the sort of thing that might fit in there, because it's a very social, user-based thing. Hey, fellow user, or maybe one.
Well, I'd like to see. Yeah, I'd like to see kind of a mentoring thing where it's like people who aren't new necessarily, but who are like, hey, I want to do this building project. I'm kind of stuck. Oh, hey, I have this other project. I'm not sure how to go about it. And they have somewhere, a group to go to, Inworld group, that they can meet people who go, okay, well, here's my ideas and here's how I would approach that, kind of a supportive group, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
That's what I would like to see. And if we can do something in the middle of AvatarFest like that, I don't know, I'd be open to that. If someone has an idea about that, come to me or come to Eryn. We'd love to hear it.
Okay, moving on. Obviously, if anything occurs to you about the fest that we haven't covered, bring it up. But moving on a bit, both of you, I know from talking with you, Eryn, yesterday, you've got mine of interest in lots of other things going on. And I know, Han, you... the thing you didn't mention when you think about contacting you and stuff, there is actually an AvatarFest Google Plus group, isn't there, as well? So people on Google Plus can follow the goings on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably our primary way of contacting and communicating is through. We have a Facebook group, but it's kind of sort of like I go over there and post announcements once in a while. But most of the chit chat goes on G Plus, on the G Plus group.
Sure. So that's. I guess you can follow either Eryn or Harold on Google Plus, but there is actually a group there you can join called AvatarFest, I believe. Or is it Avatar? Yep. Yeah. I'm sure Google being Google, you can Google it.
You're putting G Plus AvatarFest, and it'll give you straight to the community.
It will get there, right? Lovely. Now you, especially you, Han, are very. I'm of the impression that you're very involved in Google Plus. Anyway, I do. I see you comments from you left, right, and centre all over the place. I was saying earlier on the news that. I follow a lot of the chat and stuff in Google Plus and the comments and stuff. It's not the sort of stuff we cover on the news because I consider it semi-private, even though it's public. But I do know you participate in the chat here, and I'm trying to think offhand of any particular areas of focus. But you do follow the developments in OpenSim and code and stuff like that quite a lot too, don't you?
I try to. Like I said, I check out most of what's going on. I make HGB, OpenSim Virtual, OpenSim Everything, pretty much my daily routine. And I, of course, follow most of the people who are doing things in OpenSim. So I try to keep aware of what's going on. I used to run OpenSim Everything, but I was kind of like going through a thing where it's like I wasn't sure if I was going to, what I was going to do. So I figured maybe I should hand over the reins to Sunbeam, who's actually doing a great job with the group. So, but yeah, I do try to keep on top of what is going on with the community. But my main focus is my grid and AvatarFest. So.
Of course. The reason I was asking is we have been talking a lot on the show over recent weeks, really, about the future direction of OpenSim and things like that. I mean, we'll even look at new platforms and stuff. Back at OSCC last year, I was sort of taking, I was actually, well, I'll probably say the same thing this year, but, I was saying, this is, almost a cusp point for OpenSim, because with all this VR tech taking off and, other things coming online that are platforms, often walled garden platforms, and people trying to monopolize the concept of space, let alone the individual spaces, always change. And I was saying, well, OpenSim, despite looking old in some ways, represents all the possibilities of virtual spaces, virtual worlds. Principally a communications forum, but it's 3D. We have presence. We can interact together. We can collaborate together in real
there's
time.
Artistic expression.
Yeah, and there are other things coming along that offer a little bit, like they'll offer a nice environment, but not much else, or they'll offer a totally social environment with avatars that look like matchsticks. Nobody's got the whole package, and despite its age, OpenSim does actually have that whole package. And I would say, I was taking the approach of it's well, not exactly it's now or never, but I was saying, it's a cusp point, because this brave new world, and I'm not talking about people who wear headsets, although I guess I better include them, needs a 3D social space, and many of them maybe, but the metaphor, the whole structure of OpenSim is still very much the ideal. Maybe you can, I know people are working in mesh and things, and they're building an OpenSim and then exporting it to high fidelity or space and possibly sensor.
Yeah.
Because they can. But they're simply exporting an instance. It's not, the instance deployed somewhere else will never be connected in real time. I can put a copy of the studio in, say, Sine space, right? But that it will never be connected in real time to the studio. In other words, the copy of the studio won't have me sitting in this chair unless I'm logged into another platform. So
you're not going to have the same. I actually went on to Sansar last night briefly, and that's a whole nother conversation. But I uploaded an experimental mesh that I had for terrain for my grid, and it's like, okay, but no, there's OpenSim. You've got multiple projects. You've got Moses. You've got the IMA. You've got White Core Sim. You've got these projects that have various, some professional aspirations, some just scratching an itch.
Yeah.
I see OpenSim specifically give in Sansar and space and high fidelity. They want a professional market, from my point of view. They cater to people who are professional artists, professional presentators. OpenSim will always be something that you can set up on your desktop. Sure. It will always be more accessible to a greater skill set. Grandma can set up Outworlds installer, bam, there she is. Someone, a really advanced 3D artist, who we all know several, can set it up and do wonderful, unimaginable things. There's a wide variety of skill sets that it works with, but importantly, it gives the amateur home builder an outlet, a creative outlet, a social outlet. I don't see Sansar, Space, High Fidelity, any of the next gen things really having room for the casual home builder to any degree. That certainly not to the degree that OpenSim does. OpenSim will be the platform that gives users the most power.
And it's
pretty much going on.
And as in its name, of course, it is open source. So it's, I mean, I think you're probably wrong around Signwave Space, because one of the intriguing things they're doing is that they're bringing online the Inworld building tools, collaboration tools.
Yeah, but you can't you can't. The thing is with OpenSim, I have a virtual machine with the database, asset server, all that on, and if I want to take it somewhere, throw it on a thumb drive, go over and take it somewhere. Space is an awesome platform, wonderful platform, and I support it, but it doesn't have that. It doesn't have the top to bottom control, which is something I harp on and on about. And OpenSim does.
None of them do, because if they're commercial products and have capital investment and stuff like that, none of them are going to be able to give you top to bottom control, because they return on investment, as it's called. What you have,
like I said, the thing of it is that, and those are valid concerns. And if you are wanting to do something even non-commercially, you want to present your artwork in a way that you know is secure, you're going to go to some place that specializes in security. So, but what I'm saying is that I heard you ask, what's the future of OpenSim? What place does OpenSim have in the future? And I say that the future of OpenSim is in the fact that it lends the most options and the most power to end users. So it's always going to have a place, regardless of technology advances, regardless of next-gen worlds. I think that there's always going to be a place for setting up your own world on your server or on your desktop. That's my opinion.
I actually thoroughly agree with you, although it's part of my job here to be devil's advocate. So,
if there's one thing that I would gripe about in OpenSim, it's the viewer. I think it's about high time that people get their act together and put the viewer in a browser. That's the one thing that I think is outdated.
Well, actually, we've done it. Not me, and not we in the me sort of thing. Me and the we, Handheld mentioned the IMA that both James and I are very keen on, because they're actually very concerned about disability issues, but they also have, although they're setting up working groups to advance OpenSim, they are seemingly doing it from a much more user-generated perspective. Rather, there are developers there, but the focus of the IMA is the user, the end user. So they are testing things and, approaching things from what they want to see changed, rather than developers who have a bright idea, but maybe nobody wants it.
That's how they got started.
So they've been. We'll come back to IMA in a minute, because I'm interested to know Hans' thoughts on that. But yeah, I mean, I agree that OpenSim actually offers all these opportunities. I'm personally, from a news point of view, I'm keen to see what other things are happening and test them out. I spend a couple of sessions in Signwave Space each week, and maybe once in HyperGrid. I never go anywhere else. I'm just in OpenSim, but I check out what's going on. And I think these commercial companies, it's just an odd mess. For example, like Sim on a Stick or an Outworlds install, High Fidelity, your own region, your own sandbox, as it were, is on your own computer. So you can log into that, and it connects to HyperGrid's network. But then, of course, HyperGrid's network is a proprietary network. Signwave doesn't allow you to do that, although in a sense you have your world offline, because it's in a Unity package that you have to author in before you upload. And Sansar, again, you don't have an area offline, but you upload from your hard disk and stuff. But Linden's, of course, are just being even ultra. There's nothing about Sansar that is remotely open source or interoperable.
No, not even close.
High Fidelity and Space do at least have open source components and a desire to interoperate in certain levels, but not what we used to hear. So I agree, OpenSim really is the future. But you mentioned IMA, Han, and you did, Grin. I guess you both know it. I frequently attend those meetings. In fact, they even tried to teleport me to one while the show was on just now, which I wasn't. Please ask if you want to teleport me. Then send a teleport, will you?
Yeah, blind TP from Hack. Yeah.
Yeah, Mike Laurie, I think it was. Sort of, it's about the third time this week it's happened, and I've twice I was able to click the TP and ended up in. Why have I been teleported to this meeting? Anyhow. But, I think they're doing great things. I mean, the OSCC, which hopefully this year there'll be a bit of cross-promotion between them and you, because OSCC was always aware that they wanted to try and do or connect with things that were more user-based, because, it's okay getting people to conference to talk about all the tech stuff and the professional things.
I'd love to work with OSCC. That would be great. People
do come to these events, and the most popular events, for example, was the Avatar Repertory Theatre, was it?
Yeah.
And the Safari and things like that, because a lot of people come to that conference who are in education and the industry a bit, and they don't really. They know of the social aspects of virtual worlds, but they very rarely have time to explore them. So when they get a bit of playtime at the serious conference, they're jumping up and down. Hey, we'll pick and choose which panels we listen to, but hey, we're all going to the theatre.
Who knows? Maybe by showing some recreational options, they can go, oh well, hey, maybe we should rent a server and or region, whatever, let's go to GCG and hang out and do some role play or something, that'd be really, I'm sure they'd like that, to kind of have their recreational horizons expanded, as it were.
Yeah. So I mean, there is crossover. I mean, it's like real life. If I go to, I never move out of my chair these days if I can help it. But I mean, I used to go over to Frankfurt. You'll know Frankfurt, Eryn, it's where you are, or somewhere near. I used to be at the book fair. I used to be at the book.
Okay.
Sorry, I used to be at the book fair there every year, right? And those sort of things really drain me, even if I'm not very active, and it's the atmosphere and whatever, but I'll be tired, I get up, I roll up, I sit behind a stand and then get somebody to look after it while I went walking, and God, I'll be exhausted after 2 hours. But the thing is, I left the fairgrounds, and I think within 5 minutes walk of the fairgrounds, if you head to a hotel, you're in the red light district. This is life. You turn up to a conference, and once you leave the conference, you can't have these people coming to conferences saying, so I don't want to go there. There's porn in Second Life or porn in OpenSim or something. It is real life too. You can't go to your hotel from the Frankfurt Book Fair without walking through the red light district, if I recall. It's been a while actually, but the adjacent things are there, and when people go to conferences, they go to the bars and the nightclubs and the porn bars or whatever to entertain themselves while they're at the conference. So you don't, it's not an exclusive thing. And so the way I see it is, people come to a serious conference in World, that is a great use of virtual worlds to hold serious conferences. It makes
work
an
hard
impact.
And you play hard.
Yeah, exactly. But while they're there, entertain them and tell them that they cross.
Yeah, well, absolutely. But as long as they make it so expensive for people to actually do the entertaining there.
Oh yeah.
I don't think there's going to be happening. Sorry, but
Yeah, no, I was using that metaphor really just to, because
can I jump in for a moment, please?
Yeah, a lot of what we do with virtual life is actually very reminiscent of real life. So yeah, sure, Han. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that and I actually wanted to say this earlier, but we kind of moved past it. I think that first off, with AvatarFest, I didn't so much want to replace OSCC as much as I wanted to fill what I saw as being a need. We have to come together as a community. The communities have the rituals. So that was half of it. The other half, which has nothing to do with OSCC, is I wanted to kind of include people who, like myself, didn't feel like, they'd go to OSC. I would go to OSCC and go, well, this has nothing to do with me. I want people to come to AvatarFest and go, oh, hey, yeah, I can relate to that. That's like what I do. And yeah, I think recreate, I mean, we obviously can't have porks where like a general audience kind of thing, but clubs, drinks, sure, set up a bar and you have a rock and roll bar or a theme bar, set up a replica on a parcel. We'd be happy to show that off.
Actually, it's self-evident. I didn't. It is self-evident, but I didn't ask. But I presume AvatarFest runs 24 hours a day during the duration. I mean, it's just there all hours a day.
Oh yeah, it's open to the public 24/7. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's it doesn't have apart from the weekend opening. It doesn't have an agenda. That's the other difference between a conference.
No, everyone does their own thing. The only agenda is to encourage amateur home participation, really, in the non-commercial thing, but that's just to facilitate so that, you don't have like a billion grid owners coming in and pushing out the home users. I want to be a space for people who do, our end of things.
Right. Sorry, just typing a bit of back channel there. Oh, I meant to say that. Yeah, Eryn was just checking how long we're to go. It'd be nice if we got this show down to 2 hours this week, so I reckon we got another 20 minutes or so too. Right, well, I must say I'll have to put a word in for you with the group, a bit of a steering group with OSCC. Thurza is sort of involved since last year, and James here is, so you might want to pop along to put some suggestions to them on the social side.
Oh yeah, I'd be happy to. Like I said, yeah. we were in touch with them the first year, and that kind of, I had invited them to take part in AvatarFest, and there was talk about, well, we want a parcel and all that, and it just kind of, sometimes things just drift apart. But I would love to, if there's a place for me in OSCC, I'd love to do it.
Okay, so back to Eryn for a while, and again moving a bit away from AvatarFest. Your other interests. I know when I was talking to you yesterday, we were getting into things about changes in mesh and all that sort of stuff. But what are your thoughts on OpenSim generally and the hypergrid generally at the moment, and the possible changes coming along? Some views on that front?
Well, I have sort of stopped following the technical side of it for a while now. I think what bothers me a bit is, yes, they are all volunteers, but I really feel there's a lack of vision right now. Is my take on it. I don't think the devs actually know themselves where OpenSim is going. So that's how I feel anyway. So I'm sort of just enjoying the ride at the moment, and like when we talked yesterday, I was completely surprised by the supposed changes that meshes will be on. So we'll see if my home grid moves on to 09, how many of my meshes will survive and how many will break.
Break, so, yeah, that's the word.
We'll see. But yeah, I've me sort of also being a creator, not a huge one, but I still do stuff. I've seen breakage of stuff on and on and on with every major update, and I think the worst one was the changes, the SIT changes. There actually happened two of them. And that, again, I think is owed to the fact that the devs are all volunteers and they do what they want to do. And maybe not what would be helpful for the community as a whole, because they have the focus on their own things. So I feel there's a bit of a steering hand missing with the devs, and I also think that as much as I like people going into their own directions and being enthused about something and just go ahead and do stuff, with these various forks that are out, I think there's also a bit of power delusion happening, diversion, that if focused on the main OpenSim development, we could be much further down the line. That's what I think anyway.
I think it's not just a volunteer thing, but even within the volunteer structure, there is no like team leader that you. Some might argue that, but I mean that you perceive or the outsiders perceive. There's a code merge going on, and that's going to result in lots of changes. But frequently, I think devs are doing it because they like doing certain bits of what they do. And, I can imagine, this is just hypothetical, but I can imagine the mindset of, say, one developer, who cares which, who's really interested in, I don't know, vehicle physics or something. And they will actually be spending most of their time playing with the code for vehicle physics.
Absolutely, and I can understand that. That's the whole point.
And they will contribute a patch to the whole system when they've got something fit to submit. But you've always got to ask yourself, in that group, are there enough people in that group of volunteers to cover all aspects of it? And you mentioned two things earlier, which is why I've come back to you. The second thing, which I'll come to in a second, is if you know anything much about the IMA, because they are trying to approach this from a user point of view and doing a lot of testing. But as an example of that, the first thing is you raised a viewer. And I was surprised because you said what we need is a web viewer. There is no easily workable web viewer that can just say, put this region on the web. But the IMA actually now have 3 different sort of working web viewers, because what they've managed to do is bring various people from various places who are working on web viewers together into a working group. And that working group, the way it's structured, it means that those 3 different people can still work on their own thing, and probably are, but they're also getting together to cross-reference ideas and techniques with each other, which is what the working group's all about. It is strictly non-interfering, but like opening the avenues for collaboration cross construction. Selby Evans, for example, a chap called Dieter, he has a thing called Cyberworlds, Cyber Lounge. And Selby Evans with the IMA now have this sort of for non-profit organizations, what they call web worlds. And what you can do is you can export an OAR file or DAE files from OpenSim, and you can have them. You can have those environments put on the web. Now, unfortunately, it's like we're talking about other platforms. If I put a mesh file or an OAR file of this stage onto a website, it will look exactly like this. But unless I log in to the website, I won't be there. They won't be able to see me like they see me on video. So that's the thing I want to see overcome, is a way of having a lightweight viewport on the web, which won't necessarily allow you to build or do all the fancy stuff, but will allow you to attend concerts, meetings, sit down, stand up, dance if you want, all the elementary stuff that will, be a link on Facebook where people can jump from a link.
Absolutely.
They can jump from Facebook to a web page. The web page will have the world on it. And to all intents and purposes, you'll be in this region as a guest, but you won't be able to do half the things people in a fully fledged viewer can do.
which is absolutely fine, and that was my point initially. Is I want to see that web browser based viewer, because for people who don't know OpenSim, who don't know virtual worlds, having to install a viewer and working the viewer, not installing a program is pretty easy in most on most platforms, but actually working the viewer and getting it's not very intuitive.
It's like most software. There's a learning curve involved. We forget that it was
exactly, and it's a steep learning curve. But most people know how to drive a browser, and so for me, to lower the entry point for new people to actually get interested, in also especially OpenSim is for me one of the key pieces would be to have a viewer, a kind of a viewer, maybe even a limited one, that people can go and visit virtual worlds in a web-based, a browser-based viewer, because most people know how to work that.
Yeah. Do you think that if people were able to do that, what do you think? Do they need an avatar, or would they go in as an invisible, fly on the wall type of thing?
I would think that there should be a basic avatar that they can be.
Avatar? Okay.
A generic male, female, whatever. Mm-hmm. Or even there has been a project where somebody actually built, I think it was 20, 30 open source avatars, and they're still around on the web, and you can use them whenever and however you want. And so you can have those 20, 30 avatars to pick from. And you can just say, oh, I want to be this or I want to be that. And it's a click of a button, and then there you are, there you go. And you just enter a world. And then you're just there, and it's enough to be able to socialize, to walk around. And just to make it easy to experience that. And once they're interested and once they're hooked, they're going to get the full-blown viewer, and they're going to get past that
exactly
curve.
And they're here's the thing. Hold on here a second. Hold on. Yeah. I need to interject here. One of the problems, the major problems I have with the IMA is that, and I may be misunderstanding this, is that they've kind of said, well, Second Life compatibility is not a priority for us. And so that's fine if their priority is accessibility through the web, but then they're going to lose the people who know OpenSim and Second Life, and they're going to be competing with Space. Space has a web browser-based component already.
Yep.
And so, it's, when you talk about OpenSim and the IMA, it's starting to turn into an apples and oranges situation if they're going to just completely do their own thing.
IMA are strictly focused, centrally focused, I should say, on OpenSim and variants. Because of what they are and the idea of a connected hyperverse or something long term, they obviously have feelers out with other platforms, but they're not, everything at the moment that they're testing and the working groups they've got are everything by and large are focused on OpenSim. And one of the things, and Eryn hinted at this a minute ago anyway, is that I don't think it's a bad thing to not be interested in Second Life, because one of the things that plagues almost all the viewers we use is that the developers have built the viewers to be compatible with Second Life because they know that Second Life...
On that, the thing is that on that, it depends on what you mean by compatible with Second Life. If you're talking about from a user perspective or a server perspective, you may well be right. I don't really have an opinion. But as a user who comes in and goes, okay, I want to build something, I want to go around, I want to interact with the world the way that I am used to in Second Life,
Oh, yeah.
You're going to need to be compatible with that, or you will lose users because they'll go, hold on, I have to learn this other thing. Why don't I just go learn space, which looks better, to be blunt.
Well, you go into Sansar, and as most Second Life users have found, their controls work the same way. So
God, I used
Sansar
for 15 minutes, and I used it for 15 minutes on the keyboard, and geez, my arms are still sore. No.
It's awful. But the point is, even Linda Labs are trying to switch people, get Second Life users to move to Sansar, and they'll be far better moving here because they will.
Well, I'm actually not sure that they are. I don't know that they're necessarily trying to get the Second Life users, or if they're trying to get the Turbo Squid market and people who would traditionally be Turbo Squid customers.
Yeah, I think they want to go to the more accessible market, with headsets, but also I imagine I think Sansar had plans to.
We've been discussing that on. We've been discussing that on Second Life Universe, and we've kind of come to the conclusion that their target demographic appears to be VR enthusiasts and people who are artists like Brian O.
Yeah, but they also want a mobile client. Something that works on
not
iOS.
with Sansar. I mean, maybe they want it, but they aren't taking it.
Judging by what they've done so far, they're nowhere near actually able to do that. But it's my thought, when Eryn first mentioned the viewer, right? My immediate thought wasn't actually the web viewer, which as a lightweight introductory experience, I'm very keen on because I see it as a great way of getting people to jump into a virtual world on the web and they've never experienced before.
And I can see the appeal.
It may even be a live virtual world where an avatar in OpenSim is also in the OpenSim on the web kind of thing. I don't know. Hopefully that will come. But the other main concern I have is the actual viewers. Firestorm, we've had Jessica on this show a few times. She's actually traditionally been quite a big OpenSim fan.
Yes.
But she has about 80 developers and, 79 of them
varying opinions,
won't do anything other than Second Life work.
Yeah.
They're not interested in OpenSim.
Or they're hostile. I mean, I've read some nasty things on their Jira, so
So we've got an OpenSim version of Firestorm, which I'm using on my own grid. I like a different view for each, really. And... that's it's the non-habit version, so it doesn't have any of that deep Second Life complexities in it. But occasionally I will click on something and it tells me I haven't got enough lindens. And other times, I'll go to a menu and I was talking to Eryn about this. Having spoken to Melanie a couple of weeks ago, if I upload a mesh, right, if I'm in Second Life in Firestorm, then I think what I'm meant to do is press the Analyze button for the Havoc's physics engine to work it out for me. But if you're in OpenSim and you press that Analyze button, it immediately breaks the mesh. And
that's a confusion issue.
You see things, dialogue boxes that you think, well, they wouldn't be there if they didn't do something. I better see what they do. And then everything goes to hell. Simply because the OpenSim version didn't take that out of the menu.
Well, I think there's also a failure of communication between both dev teams from what I've read on all sides, read on the mailing list, read on the Jira. It'd be nice if people actually talked to each other and said, well, I'm building this. Okay, well, I need it to interact like that, But you're right. And one thing that I think is interesting that I'm watching from time to time is the Radagast project, which Cinder Roxley, who is very OpenSim. She's very interested in OpenSim.
I use Radagast itself all the while. I mean, I'm usually logged in here in Canada in Radagast because I'm logged into my own grid as in Firestorm, so I can see all the friends and messages coming through.
Yeah.
On Radagast,
I think that has a lot of potential as a lightweight client.
It's wonderful.
I think that's a lot of potential. Yeah.
I think it's wonderful for me because I know what everything on the menu represents. But you know, because I can sort my inventory.
And one thing that's overlooked
and,
with it, one thing that's overlooked with it quite a bit is that it does actually have a 3D view to it. And I believe she's mentioned that she's working on that. So I can, and this is why I bring it up, I can easily see that being a lightweight alternative to Firestorm, Singularity, and all that.
And it has voice now again. So you can actually use it to speak to people in world, even if you aren't in the full environment. But isn't it Cinders that is doing? Isn't she involved with Kokua now? Is it?
I'm not sure. Last I heard, I haven't heard anything since I heard that Nikki is retiring. That's the last thing I heard.
Nikki Perrion is it or something? Because I gather he's having trouble continuing with all that, but it was certainly beginning to look like the Kokua viewer might have been working towards a solution, in the sense that Kokua has never made any pretends to be a Second Life client. It is, you know, it's been built.
Well, they kept things separate. They, I believe they had a separate version with Havoc and all that in the same way that Firestorm does. At least for a while they did.
I don't think they got much traction amongst the Second Life crowd, so they just decided to focus on being an open sim viewer. And the great thing about that, if development continues on that course, is that the people creating it for the potential users will be aware of all the nonsense, the Linden legacy nonsense.
Well, that's another reason why I keep bringing up Radagast, is because, as you know, Radagast was built from the ground up. It doesn't have any of the legacy crud, basically, none of the craft. So I see, from my perspective, and I may be wrong, I see that as having the most potential, because OpenSim needs X, you can add X to Radagast. Whereas with Kokua, Firestorm, Alchemy, etc., you have to like sort out where it would even go.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's almost as though Radagast could be built into a full client as well as being a lightweight client.
That's a potential, I see,
Yeah, I mean, that 3D view, for example, is a crude and rudimentary, but it's really just a support tool. But I'm sure it could.
It has potential. It hasn't been realized, but yeah, exactly what you're saying. I agree.
I do think Radagast is a solution for people like us, a very useful tool. I don't think it's not like we were saying with Eryn, that, you know, a quick, easy, lightweight viewer that could be got to on the web. I'm sure something like Radagast code could probably be made into an app, as Radagast is, you know, but on mobiles or something like that. But it's the sort of tool that presupposes you will know what's on offer. You know, if you log into a grid with Radagast and you're a newbie and never been in Second Life or anywhere else, you've just been given an address to log into, the inventory, the friends list, and all the things that Radagast offers will actually not mean that much to you, because you haven't ever been in world and populated them. But but it's such a useful tool. I can't live without Radagast, to be honest.
Like I said, I could see it being. You're talking about a matter of interface there. I think that it's lightweight, and you could use the back end or whatever for a web-based viewer. You know, potentially. You know. So that, and again, you know, you wouldn't have to start from scratch with a web app. You wouldn't have to sort through the craft from Linden Labs. I think it's a nice middle point, you know, and potentially versatile. We'll see what happens, I guess.
I don't know whether anybody really noticed this, but it was a couple of months ago now, thank goodness. But for some reason, I couldn't get into this grid to do this show. And James knows this, but it's possibly no one. You will know for the archives that I couldn't, because my mouse isn't moving. And I actually did the whole show here with guests from Radagast. And I simply logged in Radagast, found the object, the chair, the center chair I'm sitting on, sat on it, And of course, I didn't have live voice, but everything else was just as normal. And we recorded the show on Skype, and you wouldn't have known the difference, because for James, he was still filming me in World, even though I was in Adagast, and same with the guests. So even for that, I was even able to do a show indirectly in Radagast. So, so useful. It's just there when you need it.
Like I said, with the IMA, I don't, once they said that, or once I read that, I keep a casual watch because I follow Selby's feed. I'm not really that up to date on what they're doing. I hope that whatever they do, they preserve the end user empowerment thing of backing things up and being able to run from one's own desktop. That would be my wish. But again, I don't follow them that closely.
There is an avatar. She really is a singer, actually, but her avatar name is Singer Girl. And she is part of, she might be in the web viewer working group, but more importantly, she has actually been building the IMA's own web portal. And basically making it look like a real virtual world with objects and stuff in it, and tutorials. And hopefully she's coming on the show in the next week or two. But they've already got a fairly good example working there. Again, its flavor is just like OpenSim, but it doesn't connect to any live grid, except for the grid that loads into the viewer on the web. It's a self-contained environment, but it's a place that basically they're using it because, as Eryn was saying, it's a very quick way to get people who want to potentially come to meetings and discussions in. They might already be familiar with virtual worlds, or they might just say, "Oh, well, I'll come if it's only a web click,"
Yeah, but I don't want to take anything from them. But having a sort of a web-based walled garden, just a prepared sort of region, that has been around for years.
Oh well, this isn't a walled garden, like a little thing built in Flash or something. It's a full kind of world viewer. What it doesn't have yet is the ability to communicate with regular OpenSim. But as far as I know, it has been built with the idea that that could come, so that the simulator you see on the web will actually be the same simulator you see in a grid viewer. And that's what I was aiming at. Yeah, that's the key. That will be the key marker on the path, when you have something on the web that can visualize the same simulator that we normally use.
Absolutely. We got directories with, all the addresses of all the different grids. And so, with the web-based browser, browser-based viewer, you can just, take one of those URLs, put them in the web browser, that is your viewer, and whoops, you're there. So, that kind of thing, without having to go through the process of setting up the viewer and all of that.
For sure.
That would be ideal. Like I said, it'd be better if it was tied into the regular OpenSim, so that potentially you could, run DreamWorld's installer and then bam, approach it through Firefox.
But that's what we were talking about. Is because they have the web browser viewer now, but it's not tying into OpenSim yet.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It would be better if
that's coming, and that's what I understood from Mel. That's what they want to have. That's what they're aiming for. So if that's coming, that's going to be the real deal breaker.
Yeah, you've got to start. You've got to start somewhere. So, if I see things moving there,
absolutely.
The great thing is, one thing, the IMA, will strictly only ever use open source software. So like OpenSim itself, they are not going to invest or get involved in anything that isn't open source. So, all these things that are emerging, despite their deficiencies, they're ready there for somebody in open source community to come in and make, plug things in. do the wiring, basically.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, like I said, it's worth watching.
Okay, now I know you're in Germany, so you're an hour ahead of even me, Eryn. So I know you're probably past your bedtime, and it's a working week tomorrow.
Yes, it is.
So I think we'll actually sort of round up, which is actually a good idea. Well, because we always plan for about a 2-hour show, and we always end up having a 3-hour show, so we won't be too badly off if we wrap soon. Before we do, James, you did come in with a question a few minutes ago, but have you seen any comments on the live stream, or have you any questions of your own?
No questions of my own in the live stream. No chat there either. So.
Go.
Everything's very clear.
Yeah. Well, no problem. We do have a live audience these days because it's Google, it's YouTube, but they tend to keep fairly quiet, except for certain people who IM me in Skype instead of the YouTube comments. We are one of these shows that gets traction throughout the week, basically.
Yeah, I guess I would offer one comment, and as I was listening to the web viewer, and especially with the idea of letting people have a casual entrance, something we could do now would be to live stream events, so that people can watch on the browser. That's one way of getting at least a kind of dynamic presence, to give people a taste, and maybe that would prompt them to download and install the client.
Well, from my point of view, that's what Metaworld has always been about. Yeah. I've always said, hey, we're doing television, and we're a bit fussy about making it like television, and conventional. But it's outreach, and if 1 in 100 people tune into the show by accident and think, "What's all that about?" So I'm going to go in there and download the client and find out. That's good enough. Yeah. Of course, this main function is a sort of forum for people to watch in the week. And people like Han will comment on Google Plus or something. It's interesting. It won't be till I go to YouTube later to actually rename the show from live broadcast to Inworld Review and the date, that I will actually see the total of all viewers for the last week. And that doesn't include the viewers that watch it on Slartist, which also takes the embed code once the show's over. So, there's also, of course, that is the choice moment when I will see any comments. I'll see the total comments. And we don't get that many comments, to be honest. So when I see last week's show as, say, 6 comments, I will open it just to find out what the comments were. And that can be interesting. It was more interesting than usual the week after Eryn in Milan was on. It can be interesting anyway. All righty. So I always go around saying any last thoughts and things that come to mind, other than what we've talked about, including in your case for both of you, any quick last minute thoughts about AvatarFest that you think we forgot to get in. So I'll go round. I'll start with you, Han. Any final sort of closing thoughts of your own, or AvatarFest, or anything?
Well, just that if you are out here and you have something that you're into that you just want to show off, you don't even necessarily want to get an audience for, talk to Eryn, talk to me. Maybe it would be good to come and show it off. We would love to have you. So that's about the end of it. That's why we do this every year. And that's it for me.
Okay. And Eryn?
Well, basically more of the same, really. Just come and join us. If you have something to show, come and talk to us. If you are a performer, DJ, singer, whatever, come and talk to us. If you are interested in watching what others do, come and visit.
Absolutely. What we can say, and remember the closing date. The closing date. What is it again? The 15th now.
15th, yeah.
Yeah. So you have everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you effectively have just over a week to get those applications in. So even if you're not quite sure, I suggest you get to Google Plus or elsewhere and contact both Anne and Eryn on that. Any closing thoughts from you, James?
Nope, all good here.
Oh, good here. That's what we like to hear. All good. All good. Okay. So I'll just thank everybody before we go. So thank you to James, who's also been multitasking on our camera deck, so to speak. Thank you, James.
Oh yeah, great to be here, Mel.
Thank you to Eryn Calen from AvatarFest, of course.
Thanks, Mel. It was a great pleasure being here.
And thanks also to Handheld from
Thank you. I'm glad that thank you. I'm glad to be here. Glad to talk with you. It was fun.
Absolutely great. Wonderful. So it's a wrap. It's a wrap, as they say. So I'm going to wish you all a very good morning, very good afternoon, or a very good evening, or indeed a very good tomorrow. There you go, Australia. I've got one for you. Wherever and whenever you may be. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.